Welcome to another exciting and elucidating episode of the Omni Talk Ask an Expert series. I'm one of your co-hosts for today's webinar, Chris Walton,
And I'm Mezzenga.
and we are the founders of Omni Talk, the fast-growing retail media organization that is all about the companies, the technologies, and the people that are coming together to shape the future of retail. And
Yes, Chris.
I am so jazzed up for today's conversation because we've brought back one of the very first podcast guests we ever had. In fact, and it was so long ago, I don't even remember what year it was. It was like 2018,
Oh my gosh, that was
2019.
like year one.
I know it's crazy. Yeah. But he and his company have been doing great work ever since. And he is back with us today to share his thoughts and expertise on pricing and pricing transparency across retailers and CPGs, I should say, as some would also use that term versus what I tried to say. So please join us in giving a big, warm LinkedIn welcome to Ben Reich, the CEO of Datasembly. Ben, welcome back to OmniTalk.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris and Ann. Excited to be here again.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Also, I feel like we need to do, after Chris mentioned that, I feel like we need to do a side-by-side pan, not just of how far the technology has come since we spoke to you several years ago, but also just like Ben looks the exact same. Chris and I, on the other hand, I feel like there's got to be like some side-by-side blast from the past, like where are they now? And Chris and I look about 1,000 times older. And Ben
I've put on a few LBs, and I've put on a few LBs.
Ben just
that's for
stays
sure.
the same, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Before we get started, just a reminder to everybody joining us live on LinkedIn right now. Please place your questions for Ben and the Datasembly team in the chat session window to your right, and they'll answer throughout our conversation today. Ben, we've grown the audience a lot since we first interviewed you. So if you don't mind, kind of take us through a little bit of background on you and what Datasembly does, please.
Yeah, happy to add some color here. So Ben Reich, founder, CEO of Datasembly. And what we do at Datasembly is provide pricing, promotion, and assortment, transparency, and insights for retailers and CPGs, especially in the domain of grocery. You know, we've really kind of caught on this idea of hyper-local, real-time price, promotion, and assortment transparency, whereby retailers, grocers, CPGs need to have this level of granularity and transparency at the item level, at the store level, in order to stay competitive in today's market. And you know, the trends of inflation and price increases and volatility are really casting a spotlight on that problem that I'm sure a lot of the audience listening today is facing.
Ben, how did you get into this?
I'm a software engineer by background. I'm
Okay.
a big data enthusiast. I worked at a retail analytics firm called Applied Predictive Technologies that later became part of MasterCard. That was where I started to sort of see under the covers of the crazy and exciting world of retail and grocery and CPG, and see some of the opportunities. You know, the world of ever shifting world of grocery kind of intersecting with the world of big data and the needs of transparency in the market, kind of converging at the time when we started the company, coming on 9 years ago.
Amazing.
And Ben, we want to get more into the company in a little bit, and what you guys do. But I think first, I want to get right to the point with a really pointed question, because I want to get your read of the market as far as pricing. Like, I feel like every pundit out there talks about inflation, but I don't always trust that they really have an understanding. I feel like they're just kind of wetting their thumb, putting it in there, and making an educated guess. But you have a really unique vantage point to answer that question. So, in your mind, specifically, how should retailers and CPGs approach the months ahead or even the year ahead as far as pricing?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. You know, what we see in the market is based on billions of product observations collected every day from hundreds of thousands of store locations across the country, millions of distinct products. So, you know, we're not taking some basket sample to measure inflationary pressure or price volatility. We have a comprehensive picture of the market in order to make these assessments. You know, and what we're seeing now in the market is certainly a cooling of the inflationary pressure. I mean, that is certainly happening. I'd encourage everyone, and maybe we'll even showcase it live later on this call, but to look at the grocery price index. This is a product that we launched that tracks category by category, state by state, region by region, the price increases over time, again, based on these millions, billions of product observations collected at high frequency. Over the last couple of years, it's no surprise the inflationary pressure has been the absolute, front and center of every grocer and retailer's conversations, of the joint business planning happening between CPGs and retailers, of the price volatility, of the promotional cadences, of everything is the inflationary pressure has been the top story. And we're certainly seeing the sort of tide turning in our data, and the inflationary pressure cooling. That's not without its nuances here. Now, again, this is a lot of what we see in our data is that, something like the CPI comes out and it's a single number that's supposed to kind of capture the whole market. And in reality, these things are changing regionally, category by category, item by item, retailer by retailer, depending on strategy, shopper dynamics, consumer behavior, demographics, local economies, the vicissitudes of the pandemic, a year or two ago at least. So the idea that you could say a single number and capture all the nuance is certainly, I think, sort of an antiquated viewpoint. But if we're looking holistically, we're certainly seeing some cooling. One of the exceptions I'll point to is the last couple weeks. The big story of eggflation has certainly returned, where we see this massive spike a couple months ago in egg prices, certainly kind of came back down to earth. But if you look at the grocery price index, there's a clear green line that's shooting up into the right.
Really?
Right now,
Again?
standing away from the categories.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sorry to announce this, but that's
Wow.
that's what we're seeing in the data.
So Ben, let me press you a little bit there then too, because okay, let's take the market level, macro level assumption that the market does start to cool, right? What does that imply for the retailers and CPGs in the year ahead? Like, do they need to look at their promotions differently? Do they need to lean in? You mentioned JBPs. Do they need to lean into those more? And how should they do that as well? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's certainly top of mind for everyone right now as things are changing under our feet. I do think as kind of attention moves away from pricing pressure, and look, again, my forecast here is that there's going to continue to be some pricing pressure depending on the category, depending on the item, at that sort of more granular level. And gone are the days where you could have sort of a holistic approach or strategy about something as broad and important as pricing when you're running a whole store or a category. But I do think a lot of that attention and energy has already started shifting towards promotions. And that means that, that same level of attention and granularity and recency that was required to really stay on top of the pricing trends is now shifting towards promotional execution. The idea that, CPGs running promotions need to have a deeper understanding of promotional execution at retail. Retailers need to understand their competitors and really be able to shift on a dime and be responsive to the dynamics that are happening in the market. The ability to course correct a promotional strategy and not just, copy last year's whole promotional cadence and hope that it works out again this year, I think is going to be critical for retailers to stay competitive in a volatile market. And so I do think that promotional execution focus is going to be a big part of staying relevant and staying competitive in 2024 and beyond.
So Ben, so you just make sure that the audience understands this. So you're saying that there's a need for the CPGs to, especially in this year, to understand that their promotions are actually being executed on the grocer's floor as they were designed to be executed. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, the something as basic as hitting the right promotional, price points, but also, some other nuances. Understanding your promotional effectiveness requires understanding what else was on promotion, what's happening at the store across the street, what's happening at the product next to yours on the shelf, and perhaps more critical than ever, what's happening with private label. I mean, if we take a step back here, the idea of the inflationary pressure cooling, and of course wages not keeping pace, has really caused, I think, a big retail and CPG reset here, both at the item level and at the store level. Meaning, the consumer here has to reassess what's important to them, how they want to shop, and things are changing faster than ever. I think the kind of relying on historical loyalty or trends continuing how they have isn't going to cut it when things have changed so much over the last couple years. New retailers, new store locations, price points changing more than ever, promotional strategies, the shopping behaviors from delivery to, you know, things like Instacart and local delivery and pickup in store. The consumer reset is real, and it's causing you know, a sort of a, you just have to build everything from the ground up, whether it's your consumer loyalty to your store, your brand, or the understanding of your promotional cadences. And again, getting back to that, promotional execution is going to be a critical part of that, because retailers and CPGs are going to have to be more thoughtful and data driven than ever in order to attract buyers, for, you know, to resetting buyers.
Well, and Ben, just taking all of what you just said, I think in my mind, it seems like pricing transparency should be a given here. I mean, you have educated consumers, you have, you know, more educated retail competitors that are like, you know, the data is out there. Why isn't pricing transparency more available? Like, why isn't it put into practice more? And what are the benefits from having better pricing transparency?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the truth is that with the rise of click and collect, pick up in store, local delivery, shoppers can, from the comfort of their phone, look at, you know, do comparison shopping while they're walking the aisles, and they're doing it, right? So the
Mhm.
fact is that for better or for worse, no matter what your strategy is as a retailer or as a CPG, price transparency is here, and it's here to stay. And so while there perhaps used to be some cycles you could get out of, you know, assuming that the shopper won't look at the store across the street or the store across town, or understand the promotions, how they're running at different locations. It's all happening now. And so the transparency is happening in market. And I think there's real benefits there. You know, of course there's benefits to the consumer who can expect, you know, the retailers or CPGs are, you know, have to provide sort of a competitive offering, given that the comparison shopping is becoming more beneficial. But perhaps more relevant to this conversation, for the retailers and the CPGs, there's a big benefit as well. You know,
Right.
the retailers being able to understand their competition is something that's really new. You know, gone are the days of sending a secret shopper to walk up and down the aisles and collect a handful of items from your competitor across the street. The transparency is here from companies like Datasembly that are providing that comprehensive picture of what every item at every one of your competitors is doing right now, which really means that, you know, people have to win on quality, on providing a great product, on a great store experience, on the intangibles that, you know, retailers that pride themselves on being great stores are known for. And on the CPG side, there too, understanding, you know, not just the things like Chris, you mentioned the promotional execution of your own products, but
Mhm.
the full assortment of what's happening at the store. Which retailers are carrying which of my sizes? What are they doing with my competition? Which new private labels have been introduced this week? How many items are in this? How many items are in the assortment of this category at this store location versus that? These ideas of transparency, not just about pricing, but across the whole dynamic of what's
Mhm.
happening in the store, are just the reality now. And I think if you pride yourself on your products and the quality and providing a great experience for your consumers, that means the best products are going to win.
Yeah, and pricing transparency is one angle to it, right? And especially on the consumer side, I think that's the right term. But the reason we called this webinar what we did was the single source of truth around
Mhm,
pricing,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
so that's something I want to make sure we bring out here in this section too, because that's about the discussion between the retailer and the CPG, having a single source of truth around item level pricing, around what's happening in the categories that everyone can bring to the JBP and align on, and there are no discussions. And so talk about that though too, Ben, because there are a lot of values in that I don't think we've brought out yet from both sides of the because I've been there, I've done this, like both sides of the table, sitting down and being like, look, there's no debate, we're looking at the same data here, this is what's happening.
Absolutely. This idea of a single source of truth is critical in today's world. You know, I had a user of Datasembly's data tell me, you know, he used to spend an hour of those joint business plannings. He would spend 50 minutes arguing with the retailer about what was happening in market and 10 minutes planning, you know, and
Right.
that was the way it happened. Now with products like Datasembly, and this whole idea of market transparency, that's gone, right? Everyone's coming to that meeting understanding what's happening in market. There's no debate about whether or not, the competitor across the street is carrying this item, or how many stores, are hitting this price point, or where this promotion was being executed. It's all out on the table, which in my eye makes for much tighter relationships between CPGs and retailers. Look, everyone knows that things are more volatile than they've ever been, and the big reset in grocery and CPG and retail is here to stay. And that means that everyone has to be more data driven, and everyone is ready to do so. So if you're the CPG bringing great data and insights and analytics to the table, to the retailer, based on data that you can share, that they probably also have, that's based in a single source of truth that everyone is agreeing to from the front, it just leads to a better discussion, a deeper relationship, and better joint business planning, and tighter execution. Everyone's looking to be more efficient. Everyone's looking to be a little bit smarter. And all of that means being data driven with hyper local, real time information about what's happening in market. And having a single source of truth just cuts through all the noise, and allows you to have those tighter relationships that everyone wants.
So Ben, okay, so with that said, I want you to put your money where your mouth is here too, because there's a lot of pricing companies in the market, and they all claim to do to some degree what you're talking about. But, we have thought that Datasembly is unique. So that's why we had you on the show back in 2018, 2019. So I'm curious, like, what is your secret sauce that enables you to create this single source of truth across retailers and CPGs?
The rise of click and collect, pick up in store, and local delivery means that so much of this critical, hyper local pricing, promotion, and assortment and availability information is just available online. Like we
Right.
said, any shopper themselves is doing that comparison shopping when they're walking through the store. The fact is that collecting this data from the web at scale is a major technical challenge. And
Sounds pretty hard.
that's really what we've cracked. So our data collection system is now crawling and scraping billions of product observations a day from hundreds of thousands of store locations across the web. Nobody else has achieved this scale or scope of data collection and uptime. And week after week, now year on year, with years of historical data, we see that this localized, comprehensive tracking is critical to provide the sort of insights and analytics that really drive the performance metrics that everyone's looking at. So we're collecting data at massive scale, and a critical element here, especially as we're talking about inflation, trends, price increases, is the historical data. We've now been doing this. You mentioned we were one of your first
Yeah.
podcast guests before anyone was
Yeah.
doing podcasts,
Right.
8 years ago or whatever it was at this point. The fact is that historical data is critical. Having a snapshot of what's happening today is useful for some things, but of course, having those year-on-year trends, accounting for seasonality, seeing inflation in action, understanding the pre-post pandemic effects at this point, those are all critical to really drive the sort of deep understanding of marketplace dynamics. And the way the web works is, you could look at today's prices, but you can never load what the internet looked like yesterday. And so that historical data is something that is really unique and proprietary to what we're providing, beyond that localized, comprehensive, granular, item level, store level picture of what's happening. Of course, beyond that, there's a lot of technology that goes into matching, correlating, associating, harmonizing the data, which of course, when you're collecting data from the web, is notoriously difficult to normalize and work with. And then we have insights, products, dashboards that really drive home the sorts of decisions that our users are looking to make. If you're at a CPG or retailer, and you're trying to understand these marketplace dynamics, we have the tools, dashboards, and analytics that help you really get on top of these trends.
And Ben, you're also doing it across everything, right? Because you mentioned private label before. Like, you're also collecting the private label data that the companies are putting on shelf for the CPG clients that you have. They're looking at their pricing too, right? Like, you're getting everything, categories, private labels, and the assortments, the individual items that the CPGs carry, right?
Yeah, spot on. I mean, the idea here is that we're not sort of cherry picking a couple items that you care about. We already are collecting the whole category, the whole store. And so, there's so many important and really valuable use cases that depend not on having a couple of your products and a couple of your competitors' products, but that full category picture, or even that full store picture, to understand, where are new private labels cropping up? Where are your competitors introducing new items in a test for 5 stores in the Northeast? Where is your, or if you're a retailer and you're tracking your competition, we've seen this rise a lot. Not just tracking your local competition, but looking broader and seeing what's happening in different regions, so you can anticipate what might be coming your way, when you're able to see what some of the big national grocers or even some of the regional powerhouses are doing in different regions, which is often predictive of the sort of activity that might be coming your way in a couple months. So that comprehensive picture is critical, to understanding the dynamics, and we're one of the best players that are providing that right now.
Which in the buyer context, having been one for almost 20 years, like your two big questions are you right price and do you have the right products? And so what you're also saying is it helps you with your product assortment decisions as well, in addition to making sure that you're right price, that's very powerful.
Yeah, that's spot on. I'm so focused on pricing. It's been so top of mind for everyone for years now. But the truth is that when you collect data this way comprehensively, you're seeing, of course, promotions as well, but assortment, new items, private label. These are critical elements. And, we certainly think as the pricing pressure, I don't want to say goes away, but certainly kind of turns down from the number one with a bullet priority at all times to a more nuanced list of priorities. These other questions of assortment and promotions are going to be more important than ever.
Ben, have any retailers that you work with, or have you yourself at Datasembly started to look at what that looks like outside of retailers, but like in the marketplace too, the marketplaces that are out there too? Like if I'm getting Heinz ketchup from Walmart via DoorDash, like does that come into play yet here, or is that like on the horizon yet to come?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, having these sort of the whole ecosystem of third parties that are part of the connection between the consumer and the product ultimately is a critical piece of the element. We do collect a lot of that data as well and provide
Okay.
insights on different parts of the market, things like, some of the big third parties. And I should mention too, another area where I know we've been very focused in this conversation is grocery. It's where, again, a lot of the inflationary pressure has been
Mhm.
most acute and where everyone seems to be focused. But we're certainly collecting, like I said, that full store collection includes a lot
Sure.
of general merchandise and other categories where the same sort of hyper local volatility,
Yeah.
that we've all seen and grown used to as shoppers ourselves, grown used to, is now coming into play in many other categories as well that we collect into.
Yeah, basically anything that's market available, you guys are
Hmm.
collecting the data
Yeah.
on.
And Ben, can you take us through a little bit of like some of the current clients that you're working with and how they're applying data assembly to their day to day?
Sure. Yeah. We work with big retailers like Target or Dollar General. And on the retail side, that sort of competitive tracking we were talking about, really understanding what's happening at the competition and
Okay.
tracking it, not just locally, not just, at a single granular level. And I'd be happy to show some of this live, but understanding that hyper local granularity and comprehensively is critical for smart price promotion and assortment decisions.
Yeah,
So
let's do it. Let's see it live. I mean, we don't usually do that on a webinar, but like, what the hell? Let's do it. Let's see it. Load it up, Ben.
sure, let's dive in. We could talk too about some of the big CPGs like General Mills and Hershey's and Nestle Purina that are also leveraging data assembly, not just for that competitive tracking, but also for their own
Yeah.
products.
Yeah, we love when people eat what they cook. So let's see it.
I just pulled up a single product in data assembly. What we're looking at is a heat map that shows a variety of different points across the country. Every point on this map is a different Walmart location, and we're looking at a single SKU, just a great value, 1% low fat milk, 1 gallon. So this is again the peak of granularity. We're talking about one item, one SKU at one retailer at one point in time, and looking at every single store location. Now, for those
4,500 plus Walmart stores, basically. That's
yeah,
what
we're
you got
looking
on
at
this
here,
map.
this is the
Yeah.
40,590
Nice.
store locations that we saw this product at is just this last week. And for the audio users, I'll describe here. We are seeing a veritable rainbow of every color as the different points on the map. The color of that point is governed by the price point from just this last week. And so you could see when we talk about hyper-local granularity, of course, some regionality jumps out here, and we could see some areas that have higher price points. But actually, what's interesting to me when I pull up an item like
Yeah.
this is seeing that it's it's not just that, hey, the high cost of living areas in California and New York have high price points. And in fact, here, there's a lot that flies in the face of our intuition. You could see Northern California, many of the stores right at or even below the national mean, which is in this gray color. And you could see the Midwest here, and
Right.
you know where you guys are in Minneapolis, affording some great milk prices. But the Southeast, you know, not the high cost of living hub that this might make you think, has extremely high prices, 15 or even 25% above the national mean here. You can see this point at 366 in Louisiana. And of course, even some more higher cost of livings in the Northeast at that lower price. But I think this really comes to life, Chris and Ann, when you zoom in. I talk about
Mhm.
hyper local granularity. You could look even deeper here and say, now we're looking at a single metro area, a single item, a single retailer. And you could see that even in that region, there's so much price variance. You could see if you're here in the southern outskirts of Atlanta, you might be paying $216 for this product. And if you go just a little bit here west, it's more,
Wow.
50% more. I mean, these are major price differences. We're not talking about pennies. I mean, in some cases we even are. And that's the level of sophistication and surgical precision that the best retailers are now bringing to bear in the market to stay ahead of the competition. So when you're, you know, 12-week rolling average of a metro area says the price of milk in Atlanta is $3, you know, I say, what the hell does that even mean, right? When every store
Mhm.
location has its own price. And if you pull it back over time, here, I'm just pulling a slider here that's changing it week over week, you could see the price points changing as well. So this is just, you know, one of the sorts of tools and visualizations that Datasembly provides really to just highlight the data and how granular it is. Of course, we provide, you know, alerts, emails, other visualizations, insights that help drive this home. But this, to me, really underscores when we talk about granular and recent and volatility, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So okay, so since we got you on the screens too, you also brought up the GPI earlier, the grocery price index that you guys are putting together. Can you give us a look at what that is too? I want
Yeah,
to
here,
make
I have
sure
that
I
open.
understand what that concept's all about.
Yeah, great. I have this open here as well. I'd encourage everyone to navigate to this. You could just search Datasembly grocery price index or go to datasembly.com/grocery dash price dash index. You could see here what we have is, you know, a tracking of category by category, anchored to a date in 2019 when we started building this product, where every category is at 100, and you could see
Mm,
how prices have increased over time. I mean, and you could see just the neck break, shocking inflation and price increases as they were happening through, you know, the end of 21 and all through
wow.
22, and even continued now into 23. But when we talk about cooling, you could clearly see the shapes of these graphs turning downwards even in some of these categories. And we have this one pull down here, include eggs. Now, the reason that's there is because when you include the egg category, I'll show you guys what this looks like. It's just quite shocking. It just dampens out everything, just
Wow.
Oh
given
my
how
gosh,
eggflation
eggflation is real.
Mm,
inflation is real. And I think
wow.
perhaps most exciting here, we could change the timer here just to the last 3 months, and you could see the egg category clearly acting differently than the other categories here that we have highlighted. And the last 2 weeks have been even quite dramatic. So we'll see we're watching that very closely. Now, I think what's important here to note is that, you know, if you're looking at the whole CPI number, you know, this might get drowned out or cause a tiny
Yeah.
blip. But man, if you're a retailer and eggs are one of your KPIs that you think drives price perception or drives shoppers, you know, it doesn't matter that the whole basket's only gone up a little bit when eggs by themselves are going up 10 points. And so understanding this and tracking it is critical. And also seeing how quickly things can shave. This wasn't like some gradual shift that then suddenly moved up. It was, you know, suddenly in that week it just skyrocketed, and it's going to be critical to track these things. Another
Ben,
thing I think that,
give the audio listeners an idea of how much eggs are going up in terms of what they're looking at too.
oh yeah, I mean, you know, I pulled up this last 3 month picture, and you could see the price of eggs just skyrocketing, going up almost 10 points over the last 2 weeks. So that's, you know, 10 percentage points based off of the anchor in 2019, going up just in 2 weeks from 125 to 136, so 11 points. You know, when all the
Wow.
other categories are flat or down even. So that's a dramatic increase. And again, this perhaps is not shocking for anyone who's going to the grocery store, but
Right.
nevertheless, understanding the level of how this is happening and how it's happening I'd be remiss too if I didn't mention the granularity here as well. This is all built off that same sort of data I just
Same
showed
data set,
in
right? Yeah.
Datasembly, which means that we're not just looking at a national picture. We could break this down by, if we let's say pull up eggs here, we could break this down by state and by different category, or let's pull up a more interesting category that has a breakdown like frozen I saw earlier, where there's different subcategories, and you could see how,
Oh, wow. You
frozen.
get subcategories too. Wow. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
frozen, and when you're talking about the whole frozen category, if you're in frozen desserts, things leveled off. Looks like way back in September of 22, it's been pretty flat since, while some of the other categories continue to rise, and certainly frozen fruits and vegetables and frozen meals have really stood out as ones that have continued to push forward. So that, we're talking about,
Yeah.
we could pull this up down to the item level. Of
Yeah.
course, having some of those higher level aggregations allows you to not be crippled by having a million different products that are in your assortment, but having something about that higher category index that helps you
Wow.
break it down.
Yeah, and if I'm a DMM at a retailer too, I'm thinking about like, oh man, this changes how I even determine my plans or my bonuses for the year too. Like in terms of like, hey, did you do well, or did you do well because your category had more inflation in it relative to others? That's pretty awesome stuff, man. Oh my
Yeah, spot
God.
on. Exactly. It's like that, capturing these things at the whole category level even really doesn't capture the nuance. And then of course, even, same point here is it's also regional, right? You have places where,
Mhm.
again, now we're just looking at the frozen category, where there's states where the index has changed, 20%, and places where it's changed, 30%. There's huge variances regionally as well. This is brought up state by state, and highlights some of the big movers. And you can do that by different sorts of metro areas, if you're urban versus rural, and a lot of different breakdowns. I'm scrolling through quickly here, but I encourage everyone to go around. I'm telling you, you could lose hours just clicking around.
I
Yeah.
know this is
Yeah.
just like fun data at your fingertips. And Chris, having not been a buyer, I have to ask you, like, how different is this
Oh, ask
for
me.
people in that position? Yes, from like what you
Oh,
were doing
no, I had none of
how
this.
you were gathering this data. I
I had
mean,
none. I had none of this. I had none of this. The best I had was market share reports provided
Right.
by Nielsen.
which came
And
out
we,
every what,
yeah,
like
pretty regularly, but
week?
those are
I
just
don't know.
market share though. They don't really have pricing in
Right.
them. And then the other thing which Ben talked about in the beginning, he kind of talked about it real quick, is there would be comp shop services that you'd send literal people out to look at specific items. They couldn't get the whole store. They couldn't get the whole country. And Ben is basically saying like, that's all gone now, or can be gone. You can get a real life picture of everything that's happening in every store by way of the information that is on the World Wide Web, the intraweb, and it just makes it happen. So
Thank you for calling out World Wide Web for us.
right, I
Too.
know.
That's a blast from the past.
www, but no, none of this existed. So that's why that's why I love when we do these webinars, and you can really feel me starting to geek out about this, and like how I would have used it as a buyer, how I would have used it as a DMM managing buyers, how the pricing teams could potentially use it as well as an e-com executive too, how I would use it. So like, there's so much cool stuff here. So, but Ben, we're running long on time too. So, Ann, any more final questions?
Ben, I have to ask, where do you take this next?
Yeah, that's a
Are
great
you going to
question.
continue to stay in grocery? You mentioned going out to some other verticals, but how are you thinking about like kind of what lies ahead for you and for Datasembly in 2024?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our ultimate vision here is total transparency for every product being sold everywhere, right? That means through any channel, any sort of product, any retailer, any category. Our goal really is to capture all of this information and make it available at the fingertips of retailers and CPGs who are trying to get products in consumers' hands, drive shopper behavior, and ultimately, we think transparency is the healthiest ground bed, that single source of truth that's going to allow for efficiency into the years to come. So we're always adding new categories, new retailers. We'd love to hear from anyone who's interested here. Grocery continues to be a big mover, and certainly a lot of focus there, but we are not solely focused there as well.
To that point, Ben, what if people want to learn more and get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'd love everyone to navigate to datasembly.com, datasembly.com. Check out the grocery price index. Reach out to us on that website. Reach out to me personally on LinkedIn. I know this is being broadcast on LinkedIn here, so please add me, send me a message there, or email me directly if that's easier, ben@datasembly.com. Would love to be in touch and hear from anyone who is listening here, has a perspective, has something to share here. Excited to hear from everyone.
Wow. I love this conversation, LOVE in capitals. I mean, this is exact content that I love that we do and that we can bring to our audience. So Ben Reich, CEO of Datasembly, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. Great conversation, super enlightening.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Anne. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And as always, finally, to everyone that joined us live on LinkedIn, thank you to you as well, or to anyone that's listening in later. Thanks to you for tuning in. And of course, be careful out there.